Alright, I'm back again with another Battle for Bikini Bottom submission video, this time for the NG Plus or New Game Plus category. This category has the same completion criteria as any percent. Just finish the final boss with as low a number of spatulas as possible and you win.
It's almost too pretty to
However, it's a little bit different in that we start with the Cruise Bubble and Bubble Bowl. So that causes the category to be a lot faster because we already had these power-ups unlocked from what we'd normally get from defeating the boss fights that are quite slow pace at any percent. And also we have the extra movement, the faster movement from cruise boosting, which you'll see soon. We're going to activate this exploit by doing 2 frame-perfect inputs followed by a strafe to the left or right. Gives us some extra speed. We're going to use that here to disable the hand, which is the game's out-of-bounds detection. Now that's a pretty precise trick. What that does just lets us go out of bounds. Now this category is unique due to its hand tricks. When you bring the hand in and out of the run to abuse out-of-bounds mechanics. You'll see that happen later in this run. That's something that doesn't happen 90%, but it's very cool. We just got that spatula from out of bounds. Unintended way of doing that is going to let us warp to that mission that we get from collecting it and skip half the level. Pretty precise ledge grab there. A lot of this is a pretty good showcase of how cruise boost movement, which forces you forward, it pushes you forward regardless of whether you're standing still or moving. Shows you how these moves that would normally just be static and not move you when you're grounded, like the bubble bash, which is the Viking helmet move that I was doing earlier, and the bubble bounce, which is the big bubble feet ground pound move that I was doing. It allows you to string those moves together to kind of mimic what I guess like rollouts and dives would be in Mario games. Pretty similar. But it's just an exploit that boosts your speed. And it's used a lot in this category because we have it unlocked the entire time. Unlike any percent where we have it unlocked for only a third of the run. We use that, the jump and the gap crossing in this area to skip a level known as Patrick's Dilemma. Just a combat challenge, and because we have the increased speed and ability to string moves together, we can just jump across these large gaps and skip these challenges. You may have noticed that when I did that cruise boost there, I was facing to the side of the wall instead of facing forward into it. That's because we're doing an exploit called reverse cruise boosting there, which is pretty similar to normal cruise boosting, except we point the camera away from the wall to use the camera mechanics to push us away from the wall. So let's say that again. We're using the camera to push us away from the wall and push SpongeBob away from the wall with us as we're facing away. So what that does is causes the cruise bubble animation on the second cruise bubble to cancel itself and saves a little bit of time. And that small time save, say like around a second, is used to meet faster cycles in some areas. Some areas of the game require cycles to get past. So you'll see later in Bikini Bottom, there's going to be a cycle we have to meet with the reverse cruise boost that wouldn't work otherwise. If we miss the cycle, we lose a lot of time for missing it. We have to wait for the next one. What you watched just there was Rock Skip, and Rock Skip is one of the more difficult movement tricks in the run. Just because when you're cruise boosting, you can't stand still. You have to constantly move, and it becomes very skillful to stand in one area, in one spot at the same time. Because when you're standing still with a cruise boost, you're still being forced in the forward direction. So you have to learn how to do precise platforming jumps. While not falling off, you're constantly being pushed forward. You'll see here one of the effects of constantly being pushed with cruise boosting as well. That was weird. I didn't grab onto that wall for some reason. Alright, well. So I'm not doing anything right now. My hands are free. The game forces me to move while I'm in that cutscene because the cruise boost is activated. It's pushing me forward. But during that specific spatula cutscene, I'm being pushed forward, but in circles, because the game is forcing me to stay within the camera's view when it zooms on the spatula, and that's going to be used later in certain parts, which will save us from falling off cliffs and stuff like that. Pretty much it's useful for keeping us in the same spot when otherwise we'd probably fall off and die. In that situation, if we didn't have the ability to get stuck like that on that spatula, we'd probably just slide off the cliff and nothing we can do about it. But there are places where we would want to be able to slide around and not go in circles, and you'll see that later. Cruise boosting can be used to move around while you're in a spatula animation, but the catch is that you can't change your angle or do anything until the spatula animation is over. So sometimes you get in a situation where you had your bad camera angle set up and the camera angle sends you into an abyss and you can't do anything about it until you're done and you respawn after you get the spatula. So it's pretty risky. A lot of the strats in this category are very risky because of the spatula grabs. It's an overlooked aspect of this game, how hard it is to kind of just let the game take control. But here we're going to actually skip the first boss fight in this game. In NG Plus we already had the power up, so we have to fight the bosses. We only have to fight the final boss. So now we're going to do Robo Sandy skip, and this is going to skip the first hub area and go to the second one. Pretty risky strat because being out of bounds for too long can cause the hand to come back and enable the out of bounds detection again. So, good thing we got it because it does lose a lot of time when you miss it. You might wonder why we're not going to use cruise boosting in this area as well. That's just because it's beneficial to be able to use your projectiles in the tree dome. So when you're cruise boosting, you can't use projectiles unless you're facing a wall. And that's just, alright. I tried to do a double hit there. You can't, if you use the bubble bowl while you're cruise boosting, it cancels your cruise boost speed. So does getting damage, but we'll talk about that more later. And also you can't use the cruise bubble itself when you're standing in the middle of an open plane with the cruise boost. But you can use it when you're against a wall though. So you'll see in some areas we do different types of cruise boosts depending on how tall the wall is. It's a pretty movement specific trick. Aside of the frame perfection, it's also very movement precise. Alright, well that's great. That's awesome. Now I have to go back up. Yeah, the reason why that happened is because I missed the RCB, and it caused me to be off cycle. So we just skipped to the third area of the hub world now. NG Plus is a great category because it breaks the game so much by having access to this ability to cruise boost so early. It really shows the game's movement potential in a whole new light. While the first half of any percent is a lot more surgical and slow pace, with a lot more precise setups and stuff like that, NG Plus is pretty similarly paced the entire run. You always have the cruise boost movement. In this category, we do not go to the Krusty Krab before Dream. We save that for later to activate some pretty cool glitches that save a little bit of time. But yeah, that's a pretty big difference here, is that we're entering Dream under 10 minutes in the speed run. Alright, well that ledge grab isn't wanted. Hopefully I can still make the cycle here. Alright, that was pretty risky. Still got it though. What we just did there, skipped paying a clam or toll gate and Pretty much what that means in this run is that we skipped paying currency to access a new area by using some kind of a skip or a glitch. The main currency in this game for unlocking new areas, much like stars are in SM64 and moons are in Odyssey, are golden spatulas. But to get to the golden spatulas, we need to collect these shiny objects, these things in the upper right corner. When that number goes up, we collect more shiny objects. We use that to buy new areas, or sometimes even spatulas with them. That's the clan that we skipped playing by doing the super bounce skip you saw earlier with the trampoline and landing on the side of the blocks. So we skipped paying that clan. Now we're gonna do fast nut, notorious trick, frame perfect, run killer off of the slide. Alright, got it, nice. Got the trick. So there's one frame between your spinning animation and your falling animation on the slide, your tongue animation on the slide, where you can input one grounded move. Alright, hopefully this works. And that one grounded move I chose was the bubble bash, so we can use that to launch ourselves across the dream area and get to the end of Sandy's dream without doing any sliding at all. And what you just saw there was an example of how we use the camera to push us into objects to save time. Because if it weren't for that camera's angle, it would have been pushed off the cliff. And here's another example of that, where our camera angle pushes us into a safe area where we don't fall off the cliff. I know it's a lot to take in. This is a very complex speed game with a lot to talk about. But hopefully you're entertained so far. The routing in this category is really cool, though. The trick that you saw earlier in Sandy's dream is notorious for being a huge run killer, but in NG+, it's 10 minutes in, as opposed to any percent where it's 50 minutes in. So it's kind of cool how the category is flipped for certain tricks based on the routing. Alright. Goo Lagoon. You'll notice in this level we do everything in one shot as well, much like Jellyfish Fields and Dream, without any backtracking, because we already have the power-ups you unlock for doing the boss fights, so there's no need to not backtrack. There's no need to backtrack, excuse me. Did a frame-perfect triple jump up to the tower there. This game runs in 60 FPS, by the way, so these frame-perfect tricks are not easy at all. This is a damage boost that's called Sponge Glide. We use a damage boost to get stuck on the tower and then float across the entire level to reach the end of it. I did not mean to split there. That was autopilot from 90%. I split there at 90% because there's another pretty finicky trick after a Sponge Glide 90%. Alright, so we just entered the loading zone for the Goo Lagoon Pier from the back end, so we're now playing the entire level backward, which saves quite a bit of time. Another pretty cool difference between any percent and this is that in this category we have the Bubble Bowl in Goo Lagoon, so we can just hit that G-Love spin bot, the green and purple guy with the gloves on the side. We can hit him with a Bubble Bowl instead of running up to him and slamming on him. So that saves a little bit of time. It's guaranteed, which is nice. This game uses a lot of death warps. Here's an example of a death warp where we're going to die and spawn up by this checkpoint that we got earlier. And now we're going to use another clam skip. We're going to do some unintended platforming to skip paying the clam on the bottom right of the screen. You're getting a very precise ledge grab. We can use that skip to avoid paying a clam that would bring the trampoline down to us to use to get on top of that tower. And now we're just going to mission warp over here. We're going to set up for a cutscene skip. So if we hit this tent, a cutscene is going to be activated. So what we want to do is die at the same time the cutscene activates, so we can respawn and the cutscene will be skipped. So pretty much, that's all you got to know for cutscene skips, is that if you die, then the cutscene gets skipped if there was one active. And that's very important for later in the run, you'll see that. And the cool thing about this category, as I was saying before, is that there's no backtracking in any segment except for downtown, actually. So in this category, we're going to go do all the Goo Lagoon 1 stuff for many percent, and then we're going to do the Goo Lagoon 2 stuff immediately after. So it's a lot more focused on individual levels.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Once you leave Goo Lagoon, you're going to see downtown Bikini Bottom, which is a pretty interesting part of the run. I'll explain everything when we get there. For now, we got to get more socks. Socks in this game can be traded in for golden spatulas. 10 socks will be traded for 1 spatula. Alright, so here, if you look on the right, you'll see a clam, another toll gate clam. And this button that I targeted. So that is normally the button that you'd be rewarded with for paying the clam. But in this case, the button's hitbox is still active even though it hasn't come out of the goo yet for paying the clam. So we can hit its active hitbox off of the invisible button. As you can see, a spatula spawned down here for doing that. Now we're going to use an RCB, reverse cruise boost, to meet a faster kids cycle. Kids, of course, referring to this mission where we have to save the kids by popping the balloons because they're floating around. So RCB cycle is a few seconds faster than the normal cycle. That's an example of how the half a second to 1.5 second time save of using an RCB can be used to save a lot more time than just the base speed of the cruise boost, because this allows us to meet a faster cycle that we wouldn't normally be allowed to meet without reverse cruise boosting. So as I was saying before, we trade in 10 socks for 1 spatula. In any percent, we trade in 30 socks. In this category, we trade in 40 socks. And that's because in this category, we have so many more movement options open to us by having cruise boosting the entire time that we can collect 10 extra socks very quickly and get an extra spatula off of it. There's also another reason why the sock route works, and that's because of camper skip in Kelp Forest. I'll explain that one later. But downtown is where things get really interesting in this run, if they haven't already.
Downtown.
Alright, that cruise boost can be pretty tough sometimes. So now we're going to do Tiki's Go Boom with cruise boosting. Makes one of the slower paced parts of any percent a lot faster paced. Alright. Just going to hit all these buttons in a row. But for this button, we're going to turn to the out of bounds area. And because we were on the out of bounds plane for too long, the hand came back into the run to take us away. And the reason why that happens is because there are 2 types of out of bounds detection in this game. The first type that I was talking about earlier is the out of bounds zone, where if the hand is disabled, we can go into those zones, no problem. The hand isn't going to come back for us. But for the out of bounds death planes, if you're on those for too long, the hand is programmed to come back even if you already disabled it, which is a glitch in the first place, which is kind of weird that it works like that. So it negates the glitch if you go out of bounds for too long on those death planes. So you might be wondering why I did that, and I'll say it is purposeful. In that situation, it saved a little bit of time. Wow, that's very interesting. Okay. In that situation, it saved a little bit of time because it skipped a cutscene earlier and saved the time it would take to reload the level. But here's an example of another sock that's made fast through the early cruise boosting movement. But you'll see later, now that we have the hand enabled again for this portion of the run, we're going to go to rock bottom and interrupt. We're going to use rock bottom to interrupt downtown, and we're going to come back to downtown after. As I was saying, downtown's the only segment where we backtrack. We're going to do rock bottom in the middle of this. But first, we have to get through this bungee challenge. In this bungee challenge, you have to destroy all the tikis that are floating outside of the sea needle. So what we're aiming for is hitting the tikis that float and hold the other tikis up, so the other tikis can fall onto the ground and become destroyed, pretty much. They're gonna break when they hit the ground. Also, what's a little bit more difficult about this, the hitboxes are very small and sometimes inconsistent, along with the thunder tikis being an issue, where if you hit a thunder tiki, you get hurt and you take damage and you lose time. This wouldn't be that big of an issue if it weren't for the cycles in this level, where if you mess up the cycle, if you get hit by something, the cycle gets thrown off, and then you mess it up, and then you lose time because tikis are all in weird spots and they become a lot harder to hit when they're off cycle. But fortunately, we got it. Got the trick. And we're gonna head on over to rock bottom now. That was interesting.
Good.
Alright, so we're gonna go to rock bottom, and we'll be back here later. We just have to get some stuff done first. Rock bottom is a pretty interesting part of the run because the entire thing has the hand disabled in it. It has the hand enabled, my bad. Sorry to confuse, it's just disable, enable, you know, it gets a little bit confusing in my head sometimes. But here we're gonna do a slip and slide skip. Character cruise boosts are a bit more difficult than normal cruise boosts because the surfaces in which we cruise boost on them are rounded off, unlike the walls and boxes that are flat. But there are some characters that have flat hitboxes that make them easier to cruise boost on, though. Mrs. Puff is unfortunately not one of them. So that button hit that I just did with the cruise bubble was actually unintended. What you're supposed to do is get through all of rock bottom, go through the museum, go through the trench of advanced darkness to eventually pop out on that side of this area, and hit that button with your feet and go down the slide for a challenge. So what we're doing here is going to the end of that slide challenge where the reward appeared because we hit it with a cruise bubble, so the game thought that we had already started the challenge, but we didn't actually do it. So now we have the mission warp for that challenge, which means we can just warp to the end of the level where you get that mission in the first place, which we'll do later. What you just saw was a reverse cruise boost, reverse character cruise boost, which is a pretty fast move, pretty optimized method of cruise boosting. Bubble Buddy is one of those characters in this game that has a flat hitbox instead of a round one, so it's pretty beneficial that he has that so we can do a reverse cruise boost off of him. If I stand still while these shush tikis are here, that's what they're called, shush tikis. They're called shush tikis because you have to be quiet around them, otherwise they disappear. But it's funny enough that when you're walking in this game, that's the detection this game uses to decide whether the tiki should go away. So if I'm standing still, the cruise boost is still pushing me. So therefore, I can still move, and the shush tikis will still stay there. So I use that to boost myself up onto the platform. Now we're using a lot of different techs here. Clipping through laser gates and stuff. Using Bubble Bolt to cancel my momentum from cruise boosting. That's unfortunate. Alright, well, that was not planned, but we still made it. Museum is one of the most movement-intensive levels of the game. Even in NG+, with all the extra movement we do in this category. Can be pretty hard to pull off at times, especially in a marathon run. So now we just warped to that slip and slide level I was talking about earlier. We hit the button and did the challenge early. We just warped to the end of rock bottom, so now we're going to backtrack and do the entire thing backward. But yeah, Museum is a great example of how stringing moves together that would normally not string together and make you fast. With the cruise boosting exploit, you can do all that stuff, and it makes it really cool and really fun to play. That's an exploit, or a trick rather, called Sleepy Skip. It's a damage boost across the abyss to get to that spatula. A lot of damage boosts are obsolete in this category because cruise boosting is such a powerful movement option. But in that situation, Sleepy Skip is actually the optimal choice because it gives you enough height to reach the platform, whereas with cruise boosting, you don't have enough height or distance to reach it. So it's one of the very few situations where cruise boosting does not obsolete damage boosts because Sleepy Skip is such a powerful option. Damage boosting is a lot more useful in any percent because you don't have cruise boosting for 2/3 of the run, which makes the category a lot of fun to play because you don't have cruise boosting the entire time. You got to figure out other ways to cross gaps and other ways to route your game to be able to get the fastest 40 spatulas possible to unlock the cruise bubble. Whereas in this category, it's more of like a, what would this game feel like if you had cruise boost movement the entire time? And in my opinion, both categories had their own cool strats in them, and they're both fun to play. So as you notice there, the hand came back on the screen to interrupt that cutscene, which is the reason why we disabled the hand in the first place, or the reason why we enabled it in the first place in downtown. Not just to skip the cutscene downtown in a loading screen, but also to skip a really long cutscene here that is a byproduct of finishing the laser challenge. So it saves a lot of time. That cutscene is usually very long. And it also puts you back by Plankton too, so it saves that time that would normally take to go back to in the first place. Alright, we're going to go back to downtown now to finish things up. We're going to use a cruise bubble here to make this platform spawn. This split's called Don't Fall, because in this category, unlike any percent, there's a sock we have to get here on the way out of the Sea Needle. So you'll see the sock's a decently tight jump. We're going to jump from this window to that that archway over there. It's gotten a lot easier with practice, that's for sure. But now you're going to see a pretty cool part of this run that's way different than any percent. We're going to do Rooftops of SpongeBob. We're also going to get to the Rooftops of SpongeBob. It's a very risky strat going to Rooftops of SpongeBob. One mistake can lose a lot of time, so it's very important that we get this the first try around. There we go. All right, that's the more difficult part. Remember that when you're cruise boosting, you can't stand still, and there's a lot of camera movement and analog movement that's bizarre to be able to stand in one spot at the same time and turn the way you want. Very hard to master. Now we're on to what is probably perceived as the best part of this run, downtown Rooftops as SpongeBob, as opposed to Sandy. Now, even in any percent, downtown Rooftops is a very intensive part of the run for movement. And it's a really cool thing to do because you can see a lot of Sandy's potential as a character. But in this category, Sandy's slow because we have cruise boosting the entire time. So we're going to show off SpongeBob's movement potential. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, well. Alright, there we go. That button's weird sometimes. Yeah, either way, downtown Rooftops is one of the best, if not the best levels in the game for speed, tech, and movement. That's another example of how we get a sock on the way, because you have to go up here for SpongeBob Rooftops anyway, and the sock's on the way, so it saves some time. Just getting that, and a bunch of other socks that are also on the trail as well. And just trading in for an extra Patrick Spatula. By Patrick Spatula, I mean that we trade in socks to Patrick later. He's the one who gives us the sock spatulas. We give him socks, he gives us spatulas. Sorry, it's kind of hard to talk during this segment because it's so intense. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of movement. So here we're going to actually do a trick under the lighthouse. And what we just did there, it's hard to tell, but the hand did come out while we fell into the abyss there, while we activated the loading zone. So you know what that means. It means that because we had the hand out on the screen during the loading zone, we disabled the hand. So that is how we effectively get the hand back out of the run. Now that the hand's out of the run again, we can go out of bounds again. So it's a very fast way of disabling the hand. So we get through this lighthouse combat challenge. In these combat challenges, it's important to hit the duplicatrons first, which are the big blue things. They produce more robots, so the first things we always attack in those are those robots, the big blue ones. Now we're going over to Sand Mountain. It's kind of cool that the movement for menuing in this category is a lot more based on the positioning of things in the menu, as opposed to the spatula restrictions, because all these spatula gates, you see how it says I need 30 spatulas to get in there? That isn't really much of a problem in this category because we can access all 3 areas of the hub very quickly, all at the same time. I mean, without having to unlock any new power-ups. So it isn't really a problem in this category where we have to route things based on the spatula count. We can just go anywhere.
I've gone.
So that's why you see the order of segments in this category is way different than any percent's order of segments.
There's nothing like the smell of bubbles in the morning.
But yeah, we're gonna do Sand Mountain now. I almost said downtown because it plays the downtown music when you're on this slope. That's kind of funny. Anyway, this is the moment of truth where we see if we actually got the hand disabled, and we did. Because if we didn't disable the hand correctly, if we failed it, then the hand in that area too, where we went out of bounds, would just come back and take us away. And in that situation, you're gonna lose a lot of time because you have to, first off, you lose your time challenge, so you have to restart the whole level. And you have to go ahead after this is over and just go and redisable the hand, which loses a lot of time. This category has a lot of risky strats that save minimal time and have more than maximum time loss. You can lose minutes from some things in this category that only save like a second. It's pretty fun to watch for that reason too, if you understand how it works. For that trick, I just did a precisely timed spin to hit that button behind the duplicatron before it blew up on me. So when I hit the duplicatron before it destroys itself, there's a moment when the hitbox goes down and I can smack the button with the bubble wand. And then, because I'm already in the cutscene, the explosion doesn't affect me. That's my gold split sound, by the way. Whoa, I'm quick. But yeah, the cruise boost on that box that I just did there. Wow, ledge grab, okay. The cruise boost on the box that I just did there was another form of camera manipulation. Excuse me. Again, this is another focal part of the run. I gotta zone in on that. It's kind of a hard trick to do. It's a pretty precise bash boost to get over that ledge. See, your feet barely go over it. It looks precise and it is precise. Yeah, but after I finished the time trial and jumped in that box earlier, that's an example of camera manipulation strats. You may have seen it. It was very subtle, but I turned the camera just a slight bit, and that allowed me to get camera locks. And so it pushed me closer to the gate. The gate being the exit area where I go back to the lodge for the the stuff that I just did with the bash into the spatula on top of the platform. Here's another form of camera manipulation again. This manipulation pushes us into the trigger for the Mermalair main chamber. Now, this is actually one of the slower parts of the run. And that's kind of funny because you know it's a fast-paced run when this part of the run is considered to be slow compared to everything else. So I just think that's kind of funny. And it's still not a bad part of the run by any means. Melon throws look pretty clean and optimized when you do them correctly. This allows us to break pattern by throwing the melon onto the active blocks that hurt you. For some reason they didn't program those blocks to damage the melon, or destroy it rather, when you throw them onto those red blocks, but you get damaged, so we can just throw it straight across, throw it straight across, walk to the end of the puzzle to make it think that we finished the puzzle, walk back and grab the melon again. Here's an area with a little bit of RNG in it. That cannon shoots randomly with random trajectories, speeds, timing. It's all random. Kind of sucks, but that's why you got to keep on your toes and react to it. Here's an example of a clan that we don't currently skip in this run. Even though it is possible to skip it, it's slow to skip it. But I'm going to eventually, over spring break, work on a reroute to potentially remove this clan from the run. Removing this clan from the run would also remove this segment up here. In this segment, we have to turn all of these towers to make their nodes face the center of the platform. And it's kind of funny, like I see a lot of people struggle with this casually. And all you have to do is just hit these towers. You hit every tower once. Doesn't matter the order you press them in. As long as you hit every button once, it works. Which is pretty cool because it leaves room for optimization. Like, how many different ways can we throw the melons to get all the towers? How can we hit them? When do we hit them? So it's cool from a speedrunning perspective. We can make new routes for that and time it. See which ones save frames. Alright. Wow. I only got that text box for like a few frames there. That was weird. Anyway. Alright, that was much better. That was kind of strange.
Where's all the security?
But what I just did there was I skipped the entire Mermalair to get to the final fight for this level, which we are now going to skip by clipping out of bounds and touching this trigger that ends the boss fight by activating the end cutscene, which makes the game think that we finished the boss fight, so we just get the reward for it. To clip out of the map, I use an exploit called L clipping. When you have a cruise boost, it makes it a lot more consistent. L clipping is just using the cruise bubble move in a tight space to force yourself out of it. And now we're going to do the security tunnel without entering a single tunnel, because this game is very broken. Quite a bit low on shiny objects. I guess that's okay because we have some time in Kelp Forest to make up for that a little bit. Alright, security tunnel finished. Now we're just going to go to the end of the Mermalair. Just going to walk across this level. It's not worth getting a cruise boost here because you have to get rid of your cruise boost halfway through this anyway. As you'll see here, as I mentioned before, you cannot use the bubble bowl with a cruise bubble, with a cruise boost. Otherwise, you're using the bowling shot will negate the effects of your cruise boost, so it's just not really worth it to do it here. And when I reroute, I'm probably gonna use the new ballroom skip in here anyway, so that'll change a little bit by the time the summer rolls around. Now we're gonna go to the Kelp Forest, which is arguably the best part of the run. A lot of people like downtown rooftops, a lot of people like Kelp Forest. Depends on your taste. But Kelp Forest in this category is a lot more interesting than it is in 90%. And that's because we get an extra spatula in here and a lot more socks. The new spatula in here is called Campers. Just we had to find campers in the woods. by finding the campers, Mrs. Puff will reward us with a spatula for uncovering them. Fortunately for speedrunning, finding these campers involves a lot of intense movement. Makes it pretty fun to watch. But yeah, on the way we get a lot of socks, and part of the reason why this sock route works, where we get 40 socks instead of the usual 30 and 80%, is because there are a lot of socks on the way with these campers. So getting camper socks and Kelp Forest stuff gives us a bunch of extra socks that make both the sock spatula, the extra sock spatula, and the camper spatula a little bit under a minute combined. Well, I mean, both of them are under a minute together, so they're both a little bit under 2 minutes together, but you know what, you understand what I'm saying. The camper spatula is a little bit under a minute, the sock spatula is a little bit under a minute, but having them both together is the reason why they're both under a minute, because they'd both be a lot slower if one of them didn't exist, or wasn't done the same way. What we just did there, I activated a trigger by touching the sand part of that area. You might have wondered why I walked so far forward before going to the first button in that area, and that's because I had to unlock this the leaf that spawned at the bottom there, which effectively skips the entire Kelp Forest. So now we're just playing the whole thing backward. I just did that to boost over the slide and activate the slide trigger for the slide challenge. Now I'm going to go teleport to the end of the slide where we entered the level. And so that caused us to skip the entire time challenge for Mermaid Man. Now we're going to continue backtracking through the Kelp Forest. Coming up to Camper Skip is a skip that I found about a year ago. And that's what makes this whole route possible. It makes this whole route possible because Camper Skip makes campers fast, and therefore it makes the socks fast, and therefore you can ride out a bunch of dumb, slow spatulas. So it really revolutionized this category. This one skip is the reason why this category works so well. And it's really cool that when something this big gets found, like clipping through a wall to get this camper early without having to do any extra puzzle stuff. It's really cool that something so small had such a monumental impact on this run. So camper skip just lets you get that camper from out of bounds. You clip outside of that area from wedging yourself into the fish statue and L clipping out. But yeah, it's very fast. It saves you some time having to get rid of your cruise boost, use a cruise bubble to hit a button, watch the cutscene, get a cruise boost again, climb some mountains and stuff. It's just very slick. It goes very fast. And here's another movement-intensive area, much like the first part of Kelp Forest, to get these campers that we wouldn't normally get 90%. We're coming up to a skip that I call Sleepy Gate. Sleepy Gate is a pretty difficult skip sometimes. You can miss it pretty easily if your movement is a little bit off. It involves a precise bash onto this gate to float over and hit this sleepy time. Alright, well, we didn't hit him, but oh, that's not good. Alright, well, we got hit without time to get out, so like I said, not too easy. Yeah, sleepy times instantly attack you if you're within their range, unless you're sneaking. So that's a pretty rough one if you get hit there. It's a lot worse when your positioning puts you behind the clam. If you miss the gate, if you miss the bounce on the gate, you end up behind the clam. So it takes a lot longer to get hit and walk all the way around to get the camper and walk all the way back and get the cruise boost. So now we're doing the Krusty Krab fight, which is pretty funny how we do it this late into the run, but you'll see why we do it in a little bit. This is going to complete our shiny object requirement, 3,000 to pay for Mr. Krabs. Alright, so now what we're going to do is a spatula animation skip. We're going to collect 2 spatulas at the same time by talking to Mr. Krabs while we fall over the spatula we normally get for collecting the Krusty Krab, for defeating the robots in the Krusty Krab. And the reason why, the first reason why we do Krusty Krab so late in the run is because we don't unlock the Poseidon. We don't beat the Poseidon in this run. So Mr. Krabs is still stuck by the pineapple the entire game. So by doing the Krusty Krab this late in the run, we can bring him over to the Krusty Krab area before we go into the Dutchman's graveyard to make for a fast trade-in for Spatula. And when we get that Spatula with the fast trade-in, we can also hop over the Spatula for the Krusty Krab at the same time and save an extra 6 seconds from not having to watch a second Spatula animation. Dutchman's graveyard has some of the most intense movement in the entire game. Optimizing this level is extremely difficult, and any percent sub 4 is actually possible for this split, but the best I've ever gotten is like a 403 because it's just so hard to optimize. And that's also partly due to there being a new skip that saves a few seconds. It's kind of hard. Still though, with that skip to get us. Oh, what? Okay, hold on. That was scary. Sometimes you can lose your display from that because I hit it with a very awkward angle. But here's coming up to this now is Boat Bash, which is a strat that I found recently. I've improved it with another player by the name of Alex97. We both kind of contributed to this strat, but I was the one who found the original way of getting up here. It was theorized for a long time that you can skip going inside this boat and bash up on top here instead, which saves roughly 2 to 3 seconds. But I love Boat Bash, not just because it's something that the community wanted to happen for so long, and it finally happened. It turned out to be real. But I also love it because it's an example of how strats pile onto each other in this game, where I found the original strat, and then Alex improved it by a second, and then I went back and improved it by another second. So it's kind of cool how this community works off each other in that way. Community members work off each other. So what we just did there was activate the Dutchman's cannons, and that's going to allow us to fire at the robot ship. But unfortunately, this might push me off. Okay, what I wanted to do there was push myself to get stuck on the cannon. Again, another example of camera manipulation based on your angle. That time was a failed attempt, but it's alright, it doesn't lose that much time. So here, we're firing cannons at the robot ship, but the objective is to destroy the robot ship, and if the robot turrets are still active, it destroys your cannon, so you can't destroy it. So you have to go over to the robot ship and destroy those electric cannons to progress to the final fight in this level. However, there was an oversight in this game that it somehow, for some reason, unlocks the final boss fight if you just press that button, because they didn't consider that people would look in the main menu to see if the level was unlocked. So that's a pretty big skip right there. Speaking of big skips, we're about to skip the entire Flying Dutchman fight himself, so about to skip the Dutchman himself, skip the entire fight. Same principle as prawn skip, we touch a trigger that's above the map, cutscene activates, fight ends. And now we are headed into the final fight. And again, big difference. In this category, we get 40 socks, trade them all in all the way at the end of the run, and at 90% we get 30 socks, trade 10 in before Poseidon, and 20 in before the end of the run. So the route changes a lot between NG Plus and 90%. Even though we still collect the same number of spatulas, it's a very different category, and it's a lot of fun to watch and play. Alright, here we go.
They serve food here, yes, but they don't serve love.
We're going to do a very similar boss fight skip here. Get an early activation on that hand by hitting it, taking off a hit point early, giving us time to hit the second hit point and get Plankton while he's pursuing us. That was a very good Robo Sponge fight. Very good. That was a very controlled damage boost. Well, not damage boost, but rather a momentum jump off the platform, which launches us into the final trigger to end the fight and cause the cutscene to happen, putting us into the second phase of the fight. But you want to have a very controlled boost off that platform. If you go too high, you can't skip the level until you land on the ground. Otherwise, the spatula animation will play after you enter the level, which loses about 6 seconds. So you want to know when you land on the ground, and then skip the cutscene after you land on the ground to save that time. And we're coming up to time right now. Time. All right, cool. And that's again, that level itself is also incredibly broken. It takes a lot longer to do casually because we use that damage boost on the top platform to push ourselves down into that other fuse that sends us up top to the brain. And normally, when we're up on that brain area, we have to fight Roboplankton several times, but because we never finished the game as intended, we never finished that level as intended, Plankton never comes, so we can just easily just fire cruise missiles into the robot's brain and finish the run. So that was my demonstration, my commentated demonstration of BFBB NG+. Really great category. It's kind of a pain to play and grind because the movement and some of the tricks are very difficult, and some of them are a little bit inconsistent, but it's a fun category nonetheless. It's not fun to grind, definitely, but it's very fun to play in a commentated marathon style manner and show off the run. And still only a minute off of a record that I set earlier today. The record earlier today was 49:36, right? 49:36 earlier. And I had trouble remembering that because I had beaten it again the day before. This category is not as optimized at 80%, but it's still a really cool run that has a lot of potential to improve. And even though it's not as optimized 80%, which is a lot to live up to because 80% is one of the most optimized categories for its length in all of speedrunning, as far as its 3D orientation and time goes. It's very, very optimized. So it's kind of tough to compare it. But this category has its own merits, got its own tricks, got its own unique route. It's very fast-paced, very fun. So thanks for watching and considering my submission for this category. Definitely love to show it off sometime in a run. Alright, so that'll be all. Again, if you're interested in learning this game, I recommend you check out my tutorials on my YouTube channel. I have playlists you can go through. Covered a lot of strats. I will be doing a new one soon, so stay tuned. Probably sometime over spring break I'll get that sorted out. Gonna make an updated tutorial with some consistent strats that were found since the last time I made one. Alright, so thank you guys for watching. Peace out, and hopefully I will see you at SGDQ 2018.